slides? Okay. Right. But as long as they have it on,
Getting a new computer.
like, the Google Drive, then all we need is internet access
2014.
here, instead of having to, like,
Don't
load
wanna
it
get this
on
thing
to the computer.
Because I'm
They can
cheap.
just
I understand.
get it online, in the cloud.
Money that I don't have to.
Right, so maybe that
And
should
it's
just be how we
working.
do it.
I know. So are
When
you
you have
using
an
it?
electronic device that works, you try to
Yeah, you do.
save your car, right?
100%.
So I just have to try to
We got the thumbs up.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Town Board meeting, the Town of Bedford, Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. I would like to move that the Town Board go into executive session for the discussion of a legal matter prior to starting our business meeting.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. We'll be right back. So exciting. We make you wait. like to move that the town board come out of executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening, Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to call our business meeting to order. Happy to report that all power is back on in Bedford as of about 5 o'clock. NYSEG finally got everybody back up. So it's been a long 2 days of power outages. There was extensive damage on several of the lines, mostly in Lewisboro and Pound Ridge. Lots of equipment having to be moved and crews brought in to different locations to put the power back on. But glad to see that before it got too cold and dark that everybody was back up. So we will start with our public hearing set for 6 o'clock. We're a little bit late. The proposed building health and performance law that is in the agenda packet. And we will start with a presentation, I believe, by Mark Tealking, who's our Director of Energy and Sustainability and has been working with a committee that the town board created 2 years ago. To develop a potential program to enhance the landlord registry law to include some more safety and energy features. Madam Clerk, has the public hearing been noticed?
Yes, Supervisor, in the Bedford Record Review on December 8th.
Thank you. And let me just say, there were letters sent out to many people, property owners and tenants, about this hearing. And we did hear from some of those people, but because many of them came in over the last 2 or 3 days, it is very likely we're not voting on this evening, but that we would keep this hearing open through the next meeting. So, okay.
Great. Well, thank you for having me again. This is, I think, the third time we presented on the landlord registry revisions. I'm Mark Tealking, the Director of Energy and Sustainability for the town. I'm here with Mariah O'Cronley, who's my co-chair on the Building Health Performance Committee. So I'll just run through some slides to orient everybody as to what we've been working on, and then we'll go into some details on the law revisions, and then we'll move to how the law might be implemented if accepted. So in June 2007, the landlord registry law was originally passed, establishing an inspection regime related to buildings that have 2 or more units within them. This law was deemed unconstitutional in 2021, and then in late 2021, the town board established the Building Health and Performance Committee, of which I'm co-chair, to explore revising the landlord registry to make it obviously compliant with the New York State Constitution, but that also that code violations are continuing to be flagged and repaired, that serious safety conditions are immediately addressed as well, and then also layering in additional more current concerns related to buildings such as general health and safety issues, energy costs, and lower emissions and pollution related to the community. So the committee's focus were in 4 areas: health and safety for tenants, obviously top of the list; wellness related to financial impacts of living in rental buildings; cleaner air, those are community impacts, as well as overall higher performing buildings too, related to building owners, so making sure that buildings had higher valuations as well as lower maintenance costs. So the committee also focused on the statistics around the community, and as per in 2007, there's a split incentive related to how buildings are maintained if most of the residents are tenants. That's something that we researched, and it seemed to be bearing out to a certain extent. But that inspections related to energy efficiency, related to health and safety, can also improve those conditions in those buildings. So we also did some detail work within the Bedford Hill zip code, where there are significant financial concerns related to that community. And so the committee also focused on how to reduce those potential effects of not only higher energy costs, but also the cost of these inspections. So Following on to that, we did tenant interviews. It wasn't a huge survey, but it confirmed a lot of the committee's learnings around how buildings affect individuals, particularly related to health and safety, related to air quality, and related to increased costs related to higher energy costs. So this informed us. It formed the committee's work in particular and informed these revisions. First of all, the law, to make it more constitutional, will be using third-party inspectors to ensure compliance. That was a key aspect of the revision that, again, will make this law back to be more effective. Inspections for code, health, and safety violations will continue as the current law requires, but inclusive of checks for air quality, moisture, the safety of heating and ventilation equipment, and overall performance of the building is also being reviewed in these inspections. The committee recommends that instead of every 3 years, these inspections happen every 5 years because of the comprehensiveness of these inspections. The committee also included benchmarking to, again, catalog the cost of living in these buildings. And the idea there is, again, once the benchmarking is underway, those costs then can be communicated to the community. And then also it qualifies buildings for additional free and low-cost improvements to lower those costs. The disclosure of the inspection results and the disclosure of benchmark information also is another component of this, so that tenants can make good decisions when they're deciding on where to move, and also current tenants can also decide on whether or not they're living in a building that serves their needs. And lastly, the law specifically calls out services to support building owners, because building owners need to be helped into making their buildings higher performance, so that's another really key component of the law. So let's jump into the criteria. These should look familiar to those familiar with the existing law. There's really nothing new related to the criteria that could trigger a remediation. These are health and safety components that are either in New York State code or are just best practices that, again, we've been had in our law pretty much from the beginning in 2007. Emphasis, though, is put on looking at lead paint, fuel oil leaks, particularly oil, as well as heating appliances that don't vent properly, because these are areas of concern that have been flagged in other inspections, and this, again, is being called out in this part of the inspection to make sure that these are meeting certain standards. Then what we added, though, to the criteria is a focus on moisture and, again, the mechanical heating and cooling equipment. So moisture is when moisture is at a certain level, it's fine, but when it's too much or too little, that can cause health issues. So there's going to be specific criteria related to moisture, and also specific criteria related to evaluating the mechanical heating and cooling equipment, because as you burn things in buildings, sometimes they're not adequately vented. That can cause significant wellness issues within the building. We're also adding indoor air quality tests, and this is particular to, again, figuring out if these buildings are causing increased health and wellness issues for the tenants. This is not much more than an inspector carrying a monitor when they walk through the building. So they're checking for particulate emissions, CO2. Carbon monoxide is already a major issue in the inspection regime as it is today. And fuel gases such as natural gas leaks, these will all be tested under this diagnostic testing process. So let's jump into fees and costs. There will continue to be a fee related to processing the landlord registry. That's a one-time application. So once that fee is paid, that's a one-time cost. And then inspection fees will now be implemented because these are third-party inspectors that will be inspecting these buildings. What we tried to do, though, is make sure that within each class of building, and the two classes of buildings are 2 to 4 unit buildings and over 5 unit buildings, that they sister up with existing programs that New York State offers where the cost of that inspection could be actually even zero. So, for example, in units that house low and moderate income folks, these buildings would qualify potentially for an Empower inspection. This is a New York State program where the cost would be zero for those inspections. In addition, New York State offered Bedford a grant to focus on this part of our community because it's used to be designated as a disadvantaged community. So a lot of these inspections will be free just by that grant alone. If buildings are housing moderate or higher income folks, the cost is going to be higher because there's a different program that's leveraged there, but still we feel like the cost will be subsidized significantly by these New York State programs. If the building owner doesn't wish to use a New York State program, we don't feel the cost will be any higher than $500 because that's what we surveyed about 5 or 7 inspection firms. And again, the highest cost we saw was $500 per unit. And all this is subject to a request for information that the town will be doing to make sure that we get the lowest possible providers once this program gets underway. Speaking about 5-unit buildings or greater, similarly, there are programs available to those buildings that, again, might offer significant cost savings if the building owner wishes to participate in them. And again, these are subject to the request for information that we plan on hosting at the beginning of the year if the law passes. Benchmarking, again, is a cataloging of the energy use of the building to communicate to the town what the costs are of living in that building, particularly if the tenant is paying for energy. And again, this is a little bit of a lift to start for the first initial phase, but once that's ongoing, it's relatively simple. And we're expecting Bedford 2030 to support building owners to get that going. And again, this is all about communicating how much it costs to live in those buildings, particularly since tenants, particularly in the Bedford Hills community, are income challenged. So I'd like to turn over to Mariah O'Connelly, who is going to focus on the administration and the process to move forward with the registry.
Hello, I've never been here in person. It's great.
Welcome.
Yes.
Thanks for
Easy on
joining
Zoom.
us.
So these slides detail how the actual law will be implemented in the process, and I want to highlight that the initial 6 months, there's going to be a ton of communication. There's going to be resources on the town website, and Bedford 2030 will be providing in-person and phone sessions with landlords to make sure that this is as straightforward as possible. And to answer any questions, whatever the community needs, because we know this is going to be a new process in some ways because it's going to be taking the existing law and adding things to it, but we also want to make the whole law more efficient and effective and streamlined so that there isn't a ton of paper if you'd prefer emails. So that's an important component is efficiency in making this more seamless. This talks a lot about the components of the law and how Bedford 2030 and what resources the town will be providing to make sure that implementation is efficient and, again, as easy as possible for landlords. It's going to be over a 24-month process, so not all landlords will immediately be subject to the law. We're going to do it in tranches to make it easier and more manageable and to allow more time to answer more questions and have more office hours for landlords. And importantly, after the inspections, there's, as Mark mentioned before, there's very few things that will trigger remediation, but there could be recommendations from the inspector. And Bedford 2030 wants to offer resources to help landlords access funds that are available for all income level buildings to make those improvements, whether it be air sealing or insulation or potentially converting to heat pumps, et cetera. We'd like to help building owners where they can and would like to make improvements to the building, make those improvements. And there are significant state and federal funding opportunities available, so we'd like to be able to help landlords take advantage of them. You want to do the summary?
Sure. So this just sums up what I had in an earlier slide. Again, the major changes with the law as it is today is that the law will be using third-party inspectors. Inspections for codes, health, and safety violations, again, will be maintained just as the current law, but additional elements related to air quality, moisture, the safety of the heat HVAC systems, and overall performance will be included. The law will increase the timeline from every 3 years to 5 years. Benchmarking will be included as well. Disclosure of the results will happen on the town website. And a suite of services, as Mariah just talked about, will also be provided. So that's the summary of the law, and happy to take questions, or however you want to proceed from here.
I thought thought it was over 2 units. You said 2 to 4, but I thought we were going with multifamily over 2 units, or is it 2
It's-
and over?
Currently, it's 2 units and larger
Okay,
in one building.
okay. And do we have the breakdown of how many buildings?
We have a breakdown, but it's not in my head.
It's not, right, me neither. Okay,
But I could get it for you.
okay.
We know how many units there are.
Right,
There-
overall. I was just
yeah.
wondering how many there were.
There will be just under 1,000 units of housing that will be subject to the law. There are more units that are rental units, but they're either in single-family homes or they're in condos, but that does not apply. So these are only 2-unit buildings and larger. Oh, there we go. I can't read that. Yeah, so it's just about 1,000, just under 1,000 units. And the buildings are, I don't have the building number, but that should be, hopefully that's sufficient.
Right, I think when we were, like in shorthand, we were saying 2 plus, so I was thinking it was over 2, not 2 and over.
It's always been 2 and
So I didn't know how
over.
many, yep, okay. I don't know how many buildings that includes.
But there are those carve-outs, the condos and you could have 2 units on your property if they're separate buildings, that doesn't count.
It's 2 in one building,
Right.
okay.
And again, that's just keying off what was passed in 2007. That hasn't changed.
That's what the current
Right.
Yeah.
landlord registry has,
Is
yep,
that requirement.
is that requirement, okay. Questions about this updated information? Okay, well, I've received some emails with some questions or just some comments. I don't know if, we want to start with that, or if we just want to open the public hearing and hear from people. I think, one of the concerns I've heard is, well, on enforcement, which I think is going to be a challenge, and we do need to talk about that and just make sure that's clear. But if a landlord can't get a tenant to cooperate, let's say the energy bills come to the tenant, not the landlord, and the reporting of the energy use is required, what's the repercussion and how is it kind of spelled out in the law? Like, is landlord going to get in trouble that the tenant isn't disclosing that information?
So other communities that we've interviewed, and we interviewed probably, how many, like a dozen communities that have these types of laws. It's really about best efforts to get that information, and it's informational. This is not about health and safety. It's really about informational. So I don't think anyone expects this to be a heavy-handed approach related to benchmarking. It's meant to really show, again, which buildings are outperforming and underperforming. It's an opportunity for building owners to leverage programs to make their buildings better. Because once you benchmark, you then have data that allows you then to start to activate, resources and funding and other things to get those buildings going. And then, the best idea is that that tenants are better informed on how much it costs to live in those buildings. And it's a very challenging right now for people to live in buildings that have really high energy costs. So I think that's really the intent of this. New York City has been benchmarking their buildings for over 15 years. It's a science now. And obviously not a science in Bedford yet, but we think over the next 5 to 10 years with the resources that are put to bear, this will be a very significant resource for the community so that they understand what it costs to live in a building, which is some people are paying over 50% of their income for rent and utilities in Bedford Hills. I mean, it would be good to know what that number is. Yeah.
Okay, yep. Okay, so it's not clear what the penalty would be to a tenant who's not participating in the energy benchmarking.
There wouldn't be a penalty for a tenant. I don't think that the law doesn't specify that.
Right.
And, I mean, Eric can speak to this,
Yeah,
but.
the tenant wouldn't be subject to a penalty. I mean, there could be procedures, that we try to work with the landlord to try to get that information from the tenant. But I think what Mark's saying is there would not be a penalty if the landlord uses best efforts to get that information. That would be taken into consideration in determining whether to
To the landlord.
try to enforce, try to bring any kind of enforcement proceeding with regard to that,
Right.
those attempts, so.
Okay. And, another concern that I heard this week was just the difficulty in obtaining some of this funding from these programs and whether we might max out in those applications because there's too many in one area. Is there some concern that the Empower program wants it to be distributed more evenly throughout the state? And so if they are getting 20 applications for Empower in Bedford Hills, that they might start turning them down just because it's too much of a concentration in one area.
In our discussions with the Empower Program folks, that has never been raised as a concern. In fact, the money flowing into these programs is unprecedented right now. I think it's the flip side in a way. Are there enough servicers available, meaning inspectors available to provide the services? That's our bigger concern. That said, the fact that we're spacing it out over 18 months to 2 years, we feel like that's going to be mitigated. And again, maybe you're speaking to two things. First is the cost of the inspection. We feel like that there's no issues with finding money for that. These programs existed for 10 years. On the other side, though, is if the building qualifies for lots of free improvements, will there be enough money for that? That might be more challenging, but those improvements are not contingent on getting a passing score. Those improvements are optional for the building owner to take advantage of.
Okay.
And obviously, we want to lead them to those opportunities with the inspection completed. Inspection is usually a gatekeeper for those next levels of incentives and free stuff. So whether or not that's still available, maybe that's a little bit more of a risk, but I don't think there'll be any concern about having money for inspections, because it's a very low. Those programs have been around for so long. I don't think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. And then I guess some of these programs, it takes a long time to apply and get approved. So how would that, I guess if there's a deadline for having your inspection done, but you're waiting for the state to respond to an application or waiting for an inspection, how does that, is there something written in here? I can't remember that, as long as you're making best efforts, you have more time?
Yeah, I mean, that's always going to be the case, I would think. Best efforts is going to be the indication of intent, and that's, I think, going to be mitigate any kind of timeline issues. And then the other side of that, on approving the building for the programs that would allow for free inspections or low-cost inspections. Again, I think having Bedford 2030 assisting with that process is really going to streamline things. And then the third aspect is that we're doing a request for information to hire inspector or have a list of inspectors that are obviously going to respond to that they can handle the volume. So that's another, I think, mitigant to any kind of concern that the timelines wouldn't be met. But best efforts, I think, is the way we feel like this would work.
I just want
Okay.
to comment that in terms of timelines, I think the greater issue with timelines is more if you were going to apply for the free services or the reduced rate services to get insulation work done or a heat pump installed. The lag time is generally more in that area versus the inspections, because the inspections are controlled by the contractors and their schedules, and the ones that we've spoken to are very open to this, and the RFI would alert them to this, and they would staff up appropriately and be prepared for an influx of inspections from Bedford. The lag time wouldn't be there. It would be more on if you decide to pursue additional work, then you might have to wait a little bit longer, but there's
That's
no
not required in the law.
requirement in
Okay.
the law, so that's not a
Right.
concern.
Right. And then I'll ask one more question, and then we'll start the public comment and hearing. It seems that inspecting for lead paint or asbestos are kind of like one-time inspections. It's not going to be different in 5 years. So could we write it so that that's just something that's inspected once and then,
Oh, to reduce the cost of the next inspection?
I mean, it just seems that.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of these things are going to be one and done. So I think, and that's why I think we decided to do a resolution format to change the criteria in the resolution.
Right.
So the criteria now says if there is presence of paint in poor condition in a building built before 1979, they have to contact Westchester County. Maybe that's just not a factor once this first level of inspection is done.
Right, maybe
Yeah.
that, right.
That makes
After the
sense.
first inspection, that's not required anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I'd like to move that, I guess, do we already open it? I'd move you open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And if anyone would like to come speak, please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Oh, God, I'm too short.
Oh, pull it on down. Good
I'm
evening.
Kate Evans, and I only have a few minutes because I got to get to the fire department. So,
Oh, hi,
Mariah and I have had many communications. I just want to speak to a few points, then I got to run. One, I just received my letter yesterday to hear about this, so that's one point. I kind of feels a bit shifty, quite frankly. Two, I live in a 2-unit house. I live on one side, my tenant lives in the other. I'm concerned, my tenant is concerned, he doesn't like the idea of this. I've also been trying to deal with the Empower program for the best part of the last 2 years. I couldn't get anyone to call me back. I qualified for a whole bunch of free shit. Couldn't get anything. I gave up. I had to take a second job to pay for my own heating system, even though I was below the income. And it, quite frankly, stay out of my house, leave me alone. And who gets to vote on this? Do we get to vote on this, or is this the town? So that's all I came up with in the last 24 hours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it does apply for just like an accessory dwelling like this, where someone lives in the house and then has one rental? Or is this 2 rentals, Kate?
Yes,
that you have?
it would if the person is not an immediate relative in the second unit. I
Okay.
believe if they're an immediate relative in the second unit, then then it would not apply. There's an exception for that, but if it's an owner with a tenant, it does apply to as a 2-unit. And the background for this of the existing landlord registry was that there were issues with electrical, carbon monoxide, other things that caused tragedies throughout the state, throughout the country, and a lot of communities instituted these type of landlord registries to do these types of inspections with respect to electrical, fire code, safety, that type of things, to avoid in these multifamily districts. What's that?
And we already have a landlord
And-
registry law, right, and we already
But-
have that law that requires those inspections
Right.
in your building, right? Right,
So it was implemented as a safety issue. Now a lot of communities are taking that safety issue and saying it can also be a building performance and
Right.
issue and that's the interplay between the landlord registry and the building health aspect of this.
right, right. So most of the criteria that are on the safety list, we're already required to come and inspect in both of those units. Is it both of the units?
It's supposed to be both of the units,
Right.
even if it's a landlord-owned
Right.
unit, that it does apply. I mean, that's something the board could consider, whether it wants
Right,
to
I
make
think
an
if the
exception
owner
for that
lives
type of.
there,
yeah.
that doesn't make sense, but, in that unit that the owner lives in. But this would be to expand it to require the benchmarking and, some extra safety criteria, as well as the opportunity to have it paid for, have the inspection paid for. Right. Other comments? Questions? Please come on up. Sure, just the town, Scott, thank you.
Scott Whalen, Bedford Hills. Again, got the letter yesterday, so, it's dated the 5th or 6th, and took that long, postmarked on the 15th. I'm just a little confused, as far as the safety part, fine, smoke detectors and safety requirements for a rental. If I get my home inspected and he feels I need more insulation or my heating system isn't up to par, is that something I have to fix, or is it just recommendations and then just recommendations? So you're saying everything's the same except for you're adding this extra cost on me for
Recommendations.
an inspection, and if I don't feel like repairing anything, or I disagree with the inspector, I don't have to do it.
You don't have to do any of the, right, any of the recommendations.
And my other concern is, as a landlord, any extra cost to me as far as any repairs or things I'd have to make will go on to the tenant, because the tenant's rent will go up to do my costs. So the fact that you're saving tenants money, you're not. You're actually going to cost them more. And I don't see how someone who makes $20,000 a year can rent. I don't know where they're renting in this town. You know, there's a lot of people that would like to rent for that amount, whatever they can afford. That's all.
Thank you. Does the committee have any comments on that? Anything? Oh, yeah, come on up.
Hi, Tom Antonecchia.
Hi, Tom.
How are you?
Well, thank you.
Last week, I went over to the Board of Elections, and I registered to vote in Bedford. I haven't been able to do that, even though I grew up here, because I was living in the town of Lewisboro. But now I'm living at 155 Katona Avenue, which happens to be a third-floor apartment, which has been there since they moved the building over here from the reservoir over 100 and some odd years ago. I really don't need any recommendations on what to do with my building. We just renovated the building next door to that and put in 2 apartments, which we felt would be good for the community because the community needs housing. We did it on our nickel. There were no government programs involved. And we made our own judgments subject to review by the building department and getting building permits and COs and so on. And it was a big expense. And the operative term that this gentleman used was layering, because we get layered to death with fees and fees and fees. And we don't need any more fees. And we don't need any third-party strangers coming into our buildings telling us what to do. We know what to do. And we're doing a very good job at it. And we're not Snidely Whiplash. We're local people, and we're interested in the community and keeping the community sound. Now, landlord-tenant stuff has been going on for years. And what has come down from Albany are laws that are very protective of tenants. And I'm an attorney, and I have to deal with folks that are landlords. And these aren't big landlords. There's guys with just a couple of units here or there. But they're getting crushed by these tenant protections because they're not being used in a lot of cases as shields by the tenants. They're being used as swords to avoid paying rent and to avoid what they should be doing as tenants. And I don't think we need any more layering on top of what we have to deal with. Now, I want to thank you for sending me the letter announcing this meeting, but I just got the letter yesterday. So I haven't had an opportunity to review this law. I know the last time I came to one of these hearings several years ago, I objected to what I thought was an unconstitutional law, and apparently somebody decided it was unconstitutional because there are certain rights under our Constitution as far as property ownership. And it doesn't mean that every third party could come walking into our property. We're entitled to privacy. Our tenants are entitled to privacy, and they demand privacy. once I rent an apartment, I don't go into it, okay? The tenant deserves privacy. And I don't want my tenants subjected to some third-party guys coming in just to collect a fee and to invade their privacy. And I don't have to go to sleep at night worrying about whether I'm complying with Bedford 2030, okay? We got a couple of old buildings, and we take good care of them, and we respect our tenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak? Come on up.
Hello, William Beltran, 15 High Street.
Hello.
So I have a bunch of concerns. So the first concern was, in the presentation, we really didn't see in detail what the process was. They just mentioned the process. We'd like to see step 1, step 2, step 3, the complete process for visibility. Everybody needs to know what they're getting into. That just was not done today. That was the first concern. The level of detail that is being requested, to me, I feel is a violation. In the lease, it's specified what the landlord is paying for and what the tenant is paying for. That's an agreement between the tenant and the landlord. I don't think the town has anything to do with that. To me, I feel like that's a violation. I don't know what other people feel like, but I feel like that's a violation.
You mean the energy use?
Everything. In the lease, it's detailed, everything, all the expenses. Electricity, who pays for that? Heat, who pays for that? In some cases, it's the landlord. In some cases, it's the tenant. But that's an agreement between the landlord and the tenant. You have no business in what that is. Like, to me, that's a violation.
Okay.
So I'm also in real estate. And within the last 5 years, I know a lot of people that paid a lot of money to purchase something in Bedford Hills. They paid a lot of money. So they are in a lot of debt, and some of them are barely surviving. Most of them are, multifamily houses that they purchased. This would bankrupt them. This is a big deal. So that's my other concern. My last concern is, so this doesn't really address the housing crisis here in Bedford Hills. Housing crisis is something that's happening all throughout New York State. However, this is not addressing that. That's the biggest issue in Bedford Hills and all of Westchester. How is this addressing that? You're not. You guys need to do better.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Brenner, formerly of Bedford, soon to be back in Bedford, currently in Wacabuck. I have been over the last 20 years a property owner in Bedford, a landlord of multifamily housing, and I'm also a local contractor, and I'm also on the committee that put this together. I don't think that any of what we're talking about in terms of mandating remediation is really immediate health and safety, like carbon monoxide, disconnected flues. As part of my day job, we go into maybe 600 houses a day throughout Westchester. A year throughout Westchester and Putnam and Dutchess counties. And we see things like disconnected flues, which are, poisoning the inhabitants. Some, usually slowly, usually people don't know. And what's concerning to me is that a gentleman made a comment that once he rents the apartment, and I was a landlord too in New York State, and I sold the buildings that I owned because it's so difficult to be a landlord in New York State. I feel that pain. If there's ever a landlord-tenant dispute, the tenant wins. and there's ways for them to figure out how not to pay rent, especially during COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So I completely feel that pain. However, when you don't go back into an apartment and nobody inspects that apartment, and that tenant has disconnected, let's say, a flue to a water heater, or the range hood, or the dryer vent, or the gas connection, that's a problem not only for that tenant, but in multifamily houses, it's for the adjacent tenants. So I really feel like having these types of inspections, I think once every 5 years, is a meaningful point of time, but it's not an egregious amount of time. I also feel like and I know of, and there are programs that exist in New York State to have these inspections for free. For air sealing, insulation, and other things, these are just recommendations that the landlord doesn't have to do. And there are very, very easy fixes. If I were a landlord, like I said that I have been, and I had an inspection, I haven't been down in the crawl space for 12 years, and I see for 12 years that there was a disconnected flue from an oil boiler, I would want to know that, and I would spend, how much money that costs to fix that. But you don't know what you don't know until that gets inspected. Once every 5 years is not a terrible thing, and I would encourage the board to take the health and safety of the tenants and the people who reside in those buildings as the #1 priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We also did receive, I forgot my pile of paper, but the clerk has several records of emails that we received in support of this law, mostly supporting healthier living spaces for tenants and air quality, and making information available to people so that they could make wise decisions about where to rent property. So we did receive a bunch of those letters as well. Any other comments? I think we could. 9 letters, thank you.
Well, 10, 9 for.
9 in support. And it's not a referendum, it's not a vote, it's not how many letters did we get for or against, it was just input, for the town board to consider. Are there any other comments at this time? I know the letters did go out later than we had hoped, and so we are not closing this hearing. We will keep it open. And I don't know if anyone has any questions from the board or any discussion about any potential suggestions or changes or modifications anyone would want to consider based on the comments this evening. I think a lot of work has gone into creating this by the committee. They've worked very, very hard on what is a cross-section of tenants and landlords and building professionals and energy experts to come up with what seemed reasonable to them to present to us. And there already is a requirement that all of these buildings are registered with the building department, pay $50 per unit to have it inspected every 3 years, and for safety criteria. So there already is, a requirement that these buildings are entered and these tenants are going to have to let people in, and that is already our law. The question is whether we use third-party inspectors, and there was a case that you actually have to allow third-party inspection to be available, correct?
Well, the case law talks about town inspectors. You can't require them to go in. There is the ability of the town to get a warrant for safety purposes, and the legislature has determined that there is a right to conduct certain inspections for safety purposes. The question is, who is responsible for the inspector? So if it's a third-party inspector, the case law does say that a third-party inspector who is retained by the individual landlord there are requirements to allow them to conduct these inspections for health and safety reasons. So that's why one of the reasons the law has been revised, there hasn't been a determination that the town's law is unconstitutional as it stands right now. There's case law out there that discusses similar laws that have been rejected, and so we wanted to, part of the reason is we wanted to change that to make sure that the inspections are done in an appropriate way, and for the safety of the tenants, but that comply with the constitutional standards. So that's one of the reasons this modification is taking place.
Right. I think there's also, it's a lot of work to inspect all of these units every 3 years for the building department, and they are interested in a potential opportunity for third parties to do the inspections, especially if it is actually true that many of them could be free or reduced cost because of all the state programs supporting this. I guess the concern would be, when do those state programs run out? And in 5 years, are you paying per unit, or are you able to get those inspections free again? We don't want to put an overburden on the landlords. We certainly don't want to pass it on to tenants. And, we are hoping to do this in a way that benefits everyone, that tenants would benefit, because if there were improvements made that could make energy costs lower, they would save money. But that's out there. We have one on Zoom.
Hi, yes, my name is Peter Catazzo.
Hi, thank you for joining us.
I'm a landlord in Katona, and I just had a couple questions for starters. One is, during the presentation, you talked about third-party qualified inspectors, and I just want to understand who these inspectors are, first of all. Are they general contractors that come in, like an HVAC person, that will evaluate your air quality and make recommendations, or are they, do they hold some sort of state licensure that enables them to look at things from a safety perspective? And then just to kind of dovetail on that, who orchestrates hiring them? Is there a list when your inspection comes due? Is there a list that you hire these people, the landlord hires these people directly? Or does the town have a contract with some of them, and you make an appointment with the town? How does that work?
Thank you, Peter. Good questions. Mark's going to answer.
Hi, Peter. This is Mark Teelking. Thanks for these questions. The inspectors that we'd be choosing for the list that the town would assemble would be verified to be qualified to inspect for the things that we're looking for. Interestingly, most of the New York State programs that already have inspections happening and really energy assessments happening already look for most of the items that are already on the list from the original landlord registry, and the additional items that, some of the additional items that the town is recommending to be put in the law. So that list of inspectors and auditors already exists in a different form, but through the request for information process that the town would run subsequent to this law's passage, would quantify the list of that list of inspectors, and it would be the responsibility for the landlord to pick from that list, with Bedford 2030's assistance in making sure that whoever you're picking has the lowest possible cost, which again, hopefully will be very low. So
So there's already a list of contractors approved by NYSERDA or by the state? What's the?
In many of the building stocks, yes. And in fact, we've talked to, I think, over 6 or 7 of these firms that already are, again, qualified by New York State to inspect for most of the things that we're already looking for under the landlord registry currently, as well as the additional components. So, but we do want to do a request for information to make sure that we're getting the best price and the best set of criteria embedded within the list of contractors that would, or inspectors that would be inspecting.
Mark, quick question. Can a landlord go out for their own third-party inspector, pardon my voice, independent of the ones that we're going to bring onto ours?
So the law does allow for that, but then the building department would have to approve that inspector.
Yeah,
So
just-
that would be
just
a
again,
separate
So
step.
the landlord, my
Yes.
point is that the landlord has options, and the
Yes.
landlord's hands are not tied. That's,
Yep.
I don't want people to be forced, to feel like they're forced to use only what the town says and approves, so I don't want to put that to bed.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for that answer. It was very thorough. I have just a couple more. As far as the list, does that mean that as a landlord now, that we have to kind of like price shop? So if there's a list of, I'm making this number up, 20 qualified inspectors or contractors, whatever you want to call them. So now we, how does that work? We'll have to price shop to find the most economical inspector, or, are those prices fixed? It just kind of adds, like, from my perspective, one more element of difficulty of not being able to just select someone. Always wondering, well, is that the best person? Is that the most qualified? Or be the cheapest? Or, is there someone in between? So now it's like hiring any other contractor, where you have to, the burden is on the landlord to kind of figure out what that person's experience is compared to their price point. And, is that the way it's gonna work, where we pick our own and we have to kind of have some kind of research on our own to evaluate these, or?
I would imagine there would be a price that's set by each of these?
Yeah, again, thanks for these questions, as they're spot on. The best case for us is that the request for information that the town would run would answer all those questions that you have. The idea is to make this simple. Notwithstanding a building owner that wishes to go on their own and do that own research, that's fine, as Tom, spoke about that. But ultimately, the list that we'd be assembling would have cost per unit. It would have their qualifications. Obviously, they would meet the qualifications that the town would require. So hopefully those questions would be answered on that list for you. So the
Right,
only.
would they be benchmarked? In other words, when you buy a product on Amazon, it'll have a checklist. I'm saying it half jokingly, but not really, because I just want to make sure I'm not randomly picking someone from a list, and that I have, the public information that is necessary to say, this guy has the cheapest price, but the, most inferior service, or this guy has the most expensive price, but also, the most reputable. So, I had, from a list of however many, they're just names to me. Like, how do I, how are they rated? Is there a rating system, or like roll of the dice?
Well, again, we're not asking for a whole lot from these inspectors. There's a list of about 18 items that they would be looking for, and it's a mostly visual inspection with, again, air quality tests, which is a pretty simple piece of this. So I don't think it's super complex, and the inspectors that we've already interviewed said this is a pretty simple process for them. But these are good questions, and I think ratings of some sort might be really helpful. So thank you for these comments.
Or not even a rating, or just,
Yeah, just I understand. Yep.
Okay, and then one last question. Are there adjacent townships that are also implementing this type of, and I agree with the safety inspections 100%, but as far as the energy audits and, benchmarking, are there other adjacent communities that are doing this? And I'm just looking at it from a viewpoint of, if someone could go on the Bedford website and say, this particular house has a a low energy rating versus a house in an adjacent community or an apartment in an adjacent community that has no data on it, it really put Bedford in an advantage to attract tenants or a disadvantage? So I guess a two-part question. One, are there adjacent communities? And two is, you know, do you feel that it impacts the landlords positively or negatively?
So I believe there are no adjacent communities that currently have the landlord registry in place. I think we passed that in 2007. I think we're the only adjacent community that has anything like that. So that's been the case for the last, many decades. So I'm not aware.
But now you're making the efficiency of the homes and other information, you're making that public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
No, it's-
anyone, in any part of the world can look up, I happen to think that the apartments that we own are well kept and updated and efficient. But, properties vary, but now here's a situation where someone can look up from anywhere in the world, can look up my particular unit and, kind of, and I don't know if it's favorable or not, but, if someone has a house that has a lower efficiency rating than another apartment, but then they have nothing to compare it to in, let's say, Mount Kisco or Chappaqua or, other communities, then is that really helping the Bedford landlords?
Well, some of the feedback we have gotten is that many landlords feel their buildings are going to be highly rated. And I want to clarify one thing. There is no efficiency rating. The only ratings that we're publicizing are energy cost rating, so the cost per square foot, essentially, of that building. And then the rest of the ratings are related to health and safety. But from a comparative standpoint, I hear your point. I don't think, just to answer your question, I don't think there is any other community that's doing this, so.
But the energy benchmarking is being done in other places
Right.
and public.
New York City, for sure.
And there are other communities throughout the state that are doing similar
Like,
things, right?
isn't Ithaca doing it? Or
Around the state, there are many communities that are doing this, yes. But I think adjacent communities
Not
here,
adjacent.
no.
Right.
Just one last question. I know I told you the last one was the last question. But, so why is the town of Bedford doing the energy benchmarking? And I just want to just clarify the question a little bit is, I get billed from my energy provider every month that says, hey, you've used 25% less energy this month compared to last year the same time, and you're using 10% less energy than a similar square foot, home in the area. So it seems like some of that information is already out there and is being collected, already, and it doesn't really matter whether the tenant or the landlord is paying for that energy, but why is the town of Bedford undergoing a separate, system rather than having the professionals, the energy companies, run that audit for you?
Well, the benchmarking process has been established over 20 years ago. This is a process that, again, our town buildings are benchmarked, and so we know which buildings are higher performing and less performing, and we've been doing that for years. So I think the idea is that there's a portfolio of issues that tenants are facing, and if it's pretty simple to quantify the energy cost for what that tenant is paying for, why not do it? Especially since that process also qualifies the building owner for making those buildings better. The qualification of the programs that exist for New York State to make those buildings better, particularly related to energy, but also related to health and safety, is benchmarking. So we thought it hit two birds with one stone, if we can allow it to happen.
I'm not implying that the benchmark is ineffective or inefficient. I'm just saying if the energy company is monitoring, they're billing.
Oh,
the-
why are they not disseminating it? That's a good
Right,
question.
Why is the town then gathering that data, putting it in their own database,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and takes manpower to do that?
It's a great
where
question.
Resources already out there that we
Yeah.
could be extracting the data from, but instead we're duplicating it.
No, I'm totally with you, and we do not want to duplicate those efforts. And in fact, New York City has made it automated to the point where the building owner doesn't do anything except set up the system, and that's certainly our goal. So again, you can look up any building in New York City and see the energy performance of those buildings, again, for the last 10 years. That is hopefully what we're going to do, is make it streamlined to that point. So there is a model. We don't have it yet here in Bedford, unfortunately, but that's hopefully what's going to happen. And again, I think it's served New York City's residents really well in that they, again, can quantify they can basically choose better buildings if they choose to do so, and building owners then can market their buildings as being much more higher performing, because they actually put the grades on the buildings themselves. I don't know if you've been in New York City, but they have letter grades for the energy performance of their buildings based on that benchmarking process. So that's not our goal here, but it is ultimately to make it automated as possible. So yeah, thank you for that question.
I just want to add one point on that. The benchmarking will still go through the system that is automated, so you will be setting up the initial account and doing that work, and we're optimistic that in a not-so-distant future, the inputting of the information will be automated. So you'll have done the initial legwork, and hopefully in 2 or 3 years, crossing our fingers, that will just automatically happen. So the work that you're doing is actually work you would have to do no matter what if you were going to benchmark your building, and the maintenance of that data we hope will be automated soon.
So I don't know if this is a question for Mark or Mariah, but then what steps have to be taken to get us to a system that is automated?
Well,
We're working on that.
Wouldn't it have to come from the utility?
it would come from the utility. So Con Ed already does that in the city. So, and they have discussed and said that it's a priority to make Con Ed's ability to do that in.
There's actually a Public Service Commission ruling that says all utilities have to do this. So it's coming. All
It's just-
utilities will be doing this.
And
It's just a
NICEAG
matter of when.
has said it's also a priority for them, so really it's just a when. And how we're setting this up is the building owner would create the account in the EPA's it's called Portfolio Manager, but their system. And that account they create, they would be using no matter what to benchmark their building. And we'll actually have the data automatically flow from that account into the town system. So there won't be any duplicating, adding data places. It's going to be a one stop, you put it in there, and then hopefully very soon, 2 or 3 years, fingers crossed, it automatically is just going to flow once the owner links their utility account to it, which is what we do we're planning to do for the town's buildings as well.
But I already get a bill from NICEAG, and they know the usage for every unit that I own. Why should I have to set up another account anywhere?
We
is
totally
my-
agree. We totally agree. Hopefully this will be automated just like it is in New York City. That's the goal.
Right. I mean, I think his question goes more to, I mean, I think the answer is that it's because then it can be made public, right? It's not public when it's just on the bill, right? Right. Okay.
Good questions. Thanks, Peter.
Anything else? Peter? Come on up to the, we need you on the microphone,
You could give
so,
him the microphone. You can.
oh, you could take it, we could take it back. No, we'll bring it.
for commercial buildings as well, or just residential?
This is just for multifamily residential, yes.
I got it through a commercial building also, I own that, the letter came in through there. Do you have a residential unit in it? No. Okay.
Okay,
It was sent to me there, that's why I was saying. Okay, very good.
okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Billy Pocahontas, I have a two-family. The inspectors, are they contractors?
They're, inspectors.
Because you've been saying contractor and inspector when you were explaining them.
I think they just meant someone you hire is a
Okay.
contractor, but not necessarily a building contractor.
Right, because I'm a
Right.
contractor, I don't do inspections because it's, conflict of interest there.
Right.
So, and you said, you alluded to, it is for only starting at 2 families?
As it's written currently, it's
Okay.
starting at 2-family
Right.
buildings. Yep.
Okay. That's really only 2, and what is the inspection procedure? I mean, what's it gonna be? It's just a visual thing? Is there any actual testing going on in the residence?
I think it's an air test,
So the-
right?
The only, there's no testing other than when the inspector walks around, he's got an air quality monitor, and he's measuring those components related to humidity, related to particulates, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. Other than that, it's a visual inspection of all the criteria that we talked about.
And how long does it take, Mark? How long would an inspection like this take?
I don't have an answer to that, but, I don't have an answer to that.
Right, I guess it
don't
depends
think-
on the
Since there's
size.
no diagnostic testing, that's where it's really, do blower door tests, that sort of thing, that's very different. And the committee moved away from diagnostic testing because of the complexity around that, so. we're
Like a
just-
blower door test or a heat?
Yeah, that, we're not doing any,
Okay.
I mean, blower door test backdrafting of appliances too, so that's an important test, but we're not requiring that, so it's just a walkthrough.
Okay, so these will just be like suggestions if something comes up or whatever?
Unless it's a real health and safety
Right, okay, yeah, I get that,
required
yeah, okay,
remediation, the rest of it is suggestions, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the old houses are gonna have lead paint and stuff in them, whether it's covered or not, right? It can be covered.
But it has to be in poor condition.
Right.
Right,
The
has to be
paint, so it
flaking
can't
or
chip it,
peeling, right.
Right, okay. Because like I said, I have a 2-family and it's difficult to really make any kind of a profit on a 2-family. And now you're adding more expenditures. So, one thing I did bring up with the, building department was if a 2-family zone can have an accessory, because, single family, you can have an accessory. So I have an outbuilding, a garage. So, which would make it a lot easier to do any kind of improve with that third rental. I guess as it is now, you're not allowed, I think, an accessory is what it was, in a 2-family zone, I believe is what it came out to be.
Right.
With them. So, I mean, if we're gonna put more on the landlord, especially with all the new rules and regs that the state has come up with for landlord tenants, it's impossible to get rid of one. I went through that for months. I mean, is that something we could look at, is maybe making an accessory dwelling availability on in 2-family zones, like a single family, has, or can have? Just to kind of offset some, because we're gonna have extra expenditures here now.
Right, right.
No matter
And
how you look
that's,
at this.
you know,
No matter
we're-
how many programs are out there, and what's free and this and that, you're gonna have extra expenditures
Extra
here.
expense.
Let's be realistic.
Yeah. I mean, changing zoning is a
Yeah.
challenge, but we are undertaking a comprehensive plan process
Well,
that we will
We're
talk about.
changing this here now to something more stringent and strict, so.
Right.
And it's just, something
Right.
else we have to bear now as the landlords. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Come on back.
So I have additional concerns with all this information being public and AI being out there, people using this for a lot of different reasons. So here's an example. I have a tenant, he's paying $5,000 for a unit. That looks very attractive to somebody that may want to take advantage of that. I mean, have you looked into the possible consequences that, you putting out this information may have?
We're not putting out the cost of the rent. It would just be the electricity costs or the energy costs. Right, right, per square foot energy cost.
That's the only information you
That
put
would
out.
be the information, yep. So it wouldn't disclose how many square feet, right? No. Right.
So what do you put in? I'm trying to understand. So the expenses per square foot of the apartment, that's the only thing that you're putting?
The energy expense per square foot. Right. So if you're moving into an apartment and you want to know what's my energy cost going to be, it doesn't say what your rent will be or what your energy cost will be. It'll just say per square foot it will cost this amount for heat and air conditioning and electricity.
So it won't have any personal information?
No.
None,
It'll
nobody's
be the
names?
result, I think there's the results of the inspection, so you passed or you failed, and then the cost per square foot for energy.
All right.
Anyone else? Thank you all very much for your comments and concerns. I think I've learned a lot, and it's really good to hear it from everyone. I think we are going to keep this hearing open. Are there any comments from the board, or we want to do that the next time?
Yeah, next time for me.
Okay. So we will keep this hearing open, and I guess do I have to move to do that?
You would make a motion to whatever date the public hearing is going to be kept
So
open.
I'll move that we leave this hearing open, and we'll resume on January 2nd with comments after the organizational meeting. So that would be 6:15 PM on January 2nd. And I think if there are, any suggestions or changes that the board would like to make to this law based on the comments that we've heard, please, let's pull them together, send them to me. We can, talk about them at the next meeting if there's any changes to be made. And we appreciate everyone's input this evening. So thank you. So I made a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Okay, we will continue. I wanted to go out of order. I thank you very much. Happy holidays, everyone. See you next year, as they say. I would like to go out of order a little bit because we have Sally Corbett Turco here from Stepping Stones, or from Thrive, sorry, the Drug Abuse Prevention Council, to give us an update on the council's work, which has been exciting, and even including a name change and a refresh in their brand. So we'd love to hear from Sally and not make her wait for the whole evening.
No, you did. I made a slight edit and sent it to you. It had a school incorrect. You got that late break? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you might have it in front of you. I didn't know.
Thank you. Just close out all this.
This is.
Sure, thank you. Love it. You have enough, yeah.
Thank you, Mark and Mariah. Sorry.
I just used the clicker. The mouse, okay. Okay. Hi, I'm Sally Corbett Turco, and I live at 66 Oak Road in Katona, and I am currently the Town of Bedford's only appointed representative to the Drug Abuse Prevention Council, which is renamed Thrive, Bedford, Lewisboro, Pound Ridge. And tonight I'm here to give an update. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope that this is an opportunity for all of the public to learn more about Thrive and to get involved. That's our biggest push right now, is to get more people involved. I want to give recognition to my fellow council member, Tammy Jacobs Schulman, who's on the Zoom. She represents Lewisboro. And so I'll just go through some of what we've been working on and a little background. The Drug Abuse Prevention Council, also known as the Drug Abuse Prevention Program, is a longtime partnership of the three towns, which is renewed each year by a contract that stipulates that Bedford is the financial administrator for the organization and the largest funder of the three municipalities. So Bedford is giving $26,000 a year. And also staff time and in helping to administer the financials and other aspects, HR, et cetera. As the organization underwent a personnel transition, it identified ways to grow in engagement, visibility, and impact. We wanted a more memorable name and brand that would better reflect the scope of our work, and we selected that through a process. The structure, mission, engagement, programming, and website were among the many aspects of the organization we reviewed. We're pleased to propose changes and encourage the town to once again renew the 3-town agreement for 2024. So some highlights of the activities that have happened. We have been meeting at least monthly, year-round. Previously, the organization was only meeting during the school year, which didn't work well for planning. We worked on updating our mission, our leadership structure, and committees so that we could be poised for growth and including more people from different segments of the community. We conducted a couple of branding sessions with the help of a local marketing professional named Rich Tassone, and ultimately looked at 3 brand designs. We passed them by some students for input through a survey, and we also researched what other sorts of names were being used by similar organizations, and ultimately have a draft brand and logo that will be worked up into a more formal set of brand guidelines. We set recruitment targets for increased reach, representation, and engagement, reviewed our programming and set programming priorities, identified partner opportunities, obtained some important materials that we could start distributing, revised job description, roles and responsibilities of staff and officers, and we hired, while we didn't have a full-time a 20-hour-week coordinator, we hired an outreach coordinator on a seasonal basis, and she has helped pull together a lot of resources for us, and she will be concluding her role at the end of the month. We've been participating in the Westchester Coalition of Prevention Coordinators and a regional fentanyl event put on by a congressman. The mission that we propose and have been using on on an interim basis is that Thrive, Bedford, Lewisboro, Pound Ridge, is a driving force for combating today's mental health and substance abuse challenges by fostering healthy lifestyles through education, resources, and strategies in the Bedford, Lewisboro, and Pound Ridge communities. The structure that we've moved toward and hope that the towns will approve is that a steering committee would have 9 total appointed members, 3 from each town, serving 2-year terms, with weighted voting in the event of an absence. And then among those who would hold those titles you see on screen, 3 would serve as executive committee, and we would have formal programming, fundraising, and communications committees. Right now, we're using an interim executive committee as listed on the screen. We have written up job descriptions for each of the positions that you can read on your own time. They're pretty typical. The activities that are in process or upcoming are a community needs assessment survey. We launched it with the help of Bedford using your SurveyMonkey, and Lisa Burke was helpful with that, and we want to restart it and promote it and get more responses. We have a contract ready to go with, signed by the town for the web designer, and that person will also be working on the brand work. So that will commence soon. We are hoping to obtain thrive-alliance.org as our new URL. We'd like to recruit a new 20-hour-week coordinator, and we feel we can get some leads from Westchester Student Assistance Services, perhaps somebody who's already working as a coordinator for another town that might like an additional coordinator job. We hope to pursue funding opportunities, including grants, and a possible long-term goal would be a full-time coordinator, especially since they're dealing with 3 towns and several schools. We have produced a lot of programs or co-produced a lot of programs this year. And some highlights have been, well, let me just first point out, of the budget, about $15,500 is available for programming. Our total budget is about, I'll tell you exactly. Our total budget is $45,500. And we have about $15,500 of that for programs. So in the past year, you can see that we have presented at most of the at most of the schools. We've brought in mental health and substance abuse prevention programs, ranging from ones that are geared toward mental health and suicide prevention to sessions on things like brain science and addiction. We have also included the parents in some of these sessions. You can see that we've also had a public Narcan training, which we actually called Bedding, Books, and Narcan. And it was geared toward college students before they went back to school, so they would be Narcan trained before going to college. And they were given free Narcan and certificates showing that they were properly trained. We're also still collaborating with the other councils in Westchester in a program called No to Prevent, which is a virtual series. Our treasurer, Tammy, was able to negotiate that we would only contribute $1,500. That's discounted down from $5,000 that other councils are paying. We collaborate occasionally with the Let's Talk series of the Bedford Playhouse and help out the schools with Red Ribbon Week, Recovery Month, and providing various materials and handouts. So here's a list of some of the potential partners that we want to engage with, or we have been engaging with. As we grow, we want to get more involved with having representatives from places of worship, civic clubs, medical organizations, wellness organizations, et cetera. We have goals for the coming year. Some of them are similar to the past, some of them new. A lot of it has to do with recruitment so that we can grow and bringing in people from different segments of the community with varied skill sets, but especially those who are good at promotions, marketing, communications. We'll continue school-based programs, building our resources and communications, relaunching our website and social media, having more community events, including more Narcan training, and promoting the assessment survey, recruiting the coordinator, looking for new funding opportunities, and laying the groundwork for success by getting some of the materials and equipment and services and software that we need. We'd also like to engage the boards and the public in a vision statement development process. In the works for 2024, we have some programs you see on screen from some of those series that I've mentioned, No to Prevent, Let's Talk. The soonest is January 18th at Bedford Playhouse, and then after that, January 23rd online with a doctor speaking on the protective power of parents and caregivers. We're going to use some of our in-house talent, people who are members of the council, Donna Volpita, Tammy Jacob-Schulman, and Roberta Markowitz, to give community presentations on various topics, which will help us save some money. If we do have additional funds, we would be able to fund more panels, pre-prom speakers, and to bring back a popular speaker from the JCK Foundation. Some of the challenges we've faced are inflation, increasing costs of everything, and really our budget and the contributions of the towns have remained level. Funding is no longer going to be available to the schools from the Mount Kisco Partners in Prevention, which was a similar group in our neighboring town. And we are challenged by the lasting impact of the COVID pandemic and increasing prevalence of addictive substances and activities, which are definitely taxing the systems and the limited resources of the schools. And recruitment has been tricky for not just the part-time coordinator, but also finding other town appointees and volunteers. So we are appreciative that the town is going to be doing a recruitment push for the various committees in town. We also find that another challenge is stigma and fear. I heard from a parent at the event pictured on the screen, Dr. Dewey's presentation on brain science and addiction, that they were a little hesitant to come because they thought, well, maybe people were going to think something of their kid or something if they came to the event. And so we really have to break down that stigma, because another parent raised their hand during that event and said, what are we supposed to do about all this stuff we're hearing about, all the availability of drugs? And they said, where are all the other parents? Of 2 high schools, 16 parents showed up to the event. And the parents were saying, where are all the other parents? So we engaged them on their way out the door to get their numbers and try to connect with them and find out how to get to the other parents. So we'll be working on that. I'm going to wrap up by saying that we couldn't do what we're doing without the support of Supervisor Calvez and Town Board Member Andres Castillo, the assistance of Controller Abe Zambrano, and the help of Lisa Burke, because we've really been in partnership with all of you and really appreciate all that you've done to facilitate what we've been trying to accomplish, especially without a 20-hour-a-week coordinator. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Sally. You have really come a long way from the time two years ago when Catherine Ferrara left, and you sort of said we have to get a handle on what the mission is and how to get more people involved and how to redirect this. And you've done a great job. I think the refreshed mission is very inspiring. The name, the brand, the look of it's beautiful, and I think it's exciting and motivating. So thank you for all the work that you've done to get it to this point. And I think the new structure of having sort of a board that's managing, but it really invites an opportunity to bring in a lot more help and volunteers. And so I think that's really important. A couple of things. I know your budget is $45,000, but I believe if you spend it all, there's additional student assistance services funding available. I know, I can't remember the amount, but there's another maybe 8,000 or something that's available. So it can go up, and I know you've been talking about grants, and that's also, that's great. It's great that you've been reaching out to both John Jay and Fox Lane. I know for a while there was a lot of, well, during COVID, I guess, there was a lot of Bedford Playhouse and virtual, and I think it didn't feel like it was, being spread out around the 3 towns, so that's fantastic. And then please send me flyers for the presentations in any way that we can share the opportunities for people to attend these events and get involved. We're happy to share that and get it out there.
Great.
So thank you for all of this work. I think, and yes, we will be posting the 2 openings for the executive committee, but also we'd love to have your schedule of meetings on the website so that we can let people know anyone may attend and get involved, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay, excellent.
Yes.
So are there questions, comments?
I'd
Yes,
love to
please.
jump in. First of all, Sally, I want to thank you and really everyone on the Thrive Council for your leadership. None of this would be possible without you, and it really is a community effort across all 3 municipalities. I just want to emphasize to both the board and the public some really key points that you brought up. I think we've already addressed that. Top priority is recruitment. We need to fill out the Thrive Council, especially now that it has a clearer sense of direction. So I think this is the time that we need to be doing that, especially in Bedford. I've sort of been filling in as a possible, maybe unofficial member, but I am the liaison, and I really want to empower the community and our residents to be active members. The other thing that I was going to emphasize is where we brought up about having a community survey, which we, spend a good amount of time on, but I really want to push it out. I think it's crucial to get this survey out because it will drive the programming. It will, that way we're not just shooting darts, into the air, but we're actually targeting the issues that are most prevalent in our community. So I kind of want to add that to another top priority, our list of priorities. And then I think something that sort of, we've realized and learned, but I just want to be explicit about saying it, is how, these one-off events, perhaps at the library, are effective. We do get some turnout, but the key to success from a public health standpoint is long-term sustainable programming that's integrated in our community hubs like our schools. So, if we can only do so much in terms of programming, I'd say a huge priority are the schools where we're meeting communities where they're at. And the last thing is just in general, in terms of the philosophy of the organization and the Thrive in general, is that if we really want to address the mental health and substance use crisis in our community, we have to be looking at the root causes, right? So often in this realm, we go straight into the issue, right, and the symptoms, but there are root causes, right, and sort of looping recreation into this work and how recreational opportunities can be a deterrent against substance use. So I think in general, I would like to see, this group integrate with recreation and other committees that are actively involved in. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Absolutely
Andres.
good points. Yes. Youth involvement in recreation and volunteerism proves to have protective factors for, against substance abuse. So definitely agree, and thank you for the opportunity tonight. And I can be reached through Ellen's office if anybody's out there on Zoom tonight and wants to get involved or
Great.
here.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, anything else? Any questions? Thank you so much. And we look forward to the year ahead. Okay. Let me get back up and running here. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda. Number 1, approval of abstract claims and paid prior in the amount of $295,438.68. Acceptance of monthly reports. The request from Superintendent of Recreation and Parks Chris Soy to accept a donation provided by Mr. William A. Colavito in the amount of $5,000 to be used for park and recreational facility improvements. Consider approval of a contract with New York State Governor's Traffic Safety Committee for the total amount of $10,200 to increase seatbelt usage and reduce dangerous driving behaviors, and authorize town supervisor to execute the contract. Number 5, request to approve the schedule of the 2024 town board meeting dates. Oh, and I guess that's it. Do we have a motion to approve the items on the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Question? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Under new business, I thought there was a bill jar. Am I looking at the wrong one? Sorry, the one online does not have the bill jar on it. Oh, it's in new business. Sorry, I thought it was under consent. All right, under new business. Oh, we have a retirement notice. So I don't know if Abe is still on. He may have. Did he leave us? Can't see. Ah. He's not leaving until February. That's right, good, we'll keep him on. Well, it is with a heavy heart that I request that the town board accept the retirement notice of Abraham Zambrano, who will be retiring at the end of February after 8 years as comptroller and head of the finance department. He manages the staff there, the parking bureau, the administration of community compost program, and the EV charging stations. And Abe, we will miss you. I will read the rest of what I wrote when Abe is here, but we understand that there is, life is short and there's more to life than work, and he has a wonderful wife and lovely grandchildren, and it's time he has found for him to retire. So we very much appreciate Abe's integrity and diligence and skill and his patience and his service to the town of Bedford. So with that, I will move that we accept Abe Zambrano's retirement notice.
second, and I think it's the saddest second I've ever had to make in my life.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And we will have a back for a more proper send-off before the end of February. Number 2, we have approval of the bell jar application for American Legion Post 1575. This is so they can have that machine in their building. Do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have a request from Superintendent of Recreation and Parks, Christopher Soy, to authorize the purchase of a 4000D large area mower for the Parks Department. This is a very wide mower that can mulch leaves very well. It is not electric, but it does the leaf mulching so well that there's definitely cuts down on any need for leaf blowers, which is good. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have the we're going to skip the adoption of the Building Health and Performance Program and related actions. Is any discussion on that? We would like to discuss it later.
Can I
Yes?
just quickly
Yes,
say that,
please.
I want to state this for the record, that generally what I understood from the public hearing is that we have two competing priorities here, right? On the one hand, we have tenant safety and energy efficiency as, a big priority of the town. But on the other side, we, want to minimize the financial burden, and not only financial, but also administrative burden on the landlords, which, runs the risk of trickling down to the tenants. I think the Building Health and Performance Committee has done a wonderful job. And I just hope that we can include, some of the landlords that came here and others in that committee process, because I think that the way we're going, I support the legislation in theory, but I think the way we're going to get a legislation that really minimizes all the concerns is by ensuring those landlords are part of the, planning process. So I just want to say that for the record.
So are you inviting comments on modifications to the law from landlords, or did you want to call a committee meeting before? Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, some of
right.
it could be just dispelling myths and potentially addressing misunderstandings, but I think the other side is, maybe there are some parts that can be modified. I don't have the answer to that question, but I think it warrants further conversation and inclusion in the planning process from a committee standpoint.
I also have concerns about the expenses being incurred upon them, but I think we could benefit from possibly, if we can get side by side a look at the existing legislation and those requirements and fees, and then see on the other side what's being added, because I think there's a little bit of confusion, because I think there's this idea that this is being incurred upon them totally right now, and that it's not additions to an existing law. So I think if we can show what already exists and then what is being added to that, that may clarify some of it. So that's the first thing, but I also have concerns about the additional expenses and what happens if there is no grant to alleviate those costs going forward. We're going to have this legislation, and they are going to be responsible for it, and I think we have to figure that out.
Okay. So we will request that the committee bring some additional slides and information that simplifies it and shows those cost comparisons and law comparisons. And invite people to come and provide feedback, continue to provide feedback or potential modifications if there are different ways to do it. Yeah, okay. We have a request, sorry, I'm losing my place, to allocate $35,000 American Rescue Plan Act funds to retain Lori Hilliard once again as a Bedford promoter in 2024. Lori has, last year, the board allocated $30,000 for Ms. Hilliard to serve as a Bedford business promoter to help some of our goals in facilitating our economic vibrancy initiatives, develop ongoing and strong relationships with the Bedford business community, including the Chamber of Commerce, the BVBA, and relationships with businesses in Bedford Hills to build up the business group there and help them start their own business chamber. She has been interviewing a multitude of people and getting feedback on how the town can do better to support business, and has started working on somewhat of a how to do business in Bedford, and also making recommendations for how we can do better to help people do business in Bedford. So much of this work, I believe, is relationship-based, as we're trying to fill empty storefronts. We're working with the business community to know how the town can do better to support their efforts, how we can help bring civic groups into the mix, or volunteers who can also help support vibrancy and foot traffic and beautification and the things that also support commerce in the town. It's not that Lori is here to make the town do it all. It's to help facilitate all of these relationships and these opportunities. And she's doing a wonderful job. She's created all these relationships, and I think there's a lot more that she can do. And that is what this COVID ARPA funding, specifically stated, that to help municipalities with pandemic recovery, with economic vibrancy, and with revitalization after the pandemic. So it is a verified legitimate use for these funds. We still have over $1 million left in the ARPA funding, which, I know we may want to use most of it for infrastructure, but for $35,000, we certainly get a lot from Lori Hilliard. So I would like to make a motion that we allocate $35,000 to support this position.
Second.
Any discussion? Comments, please?
I only want to comment that in reviewing the bills, she works many more hours than the 35,000 that she has been allocated.
Well,
I'm not saying that's a good thing, that we are underpaying her. I'm just saying that we are getting our money's worth.
well, she is a community member, and she cares very much about Bedford Hills, and she does work very hard, and she's done a great job.
Yeah, I'm just really happy to have the opportunity to let her continue to do her work.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's started some initiatives and conversations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I think to retain her allows those conversations to continue. And I think that we will continue to see some growth in Bedford Hills and have a greater understanding of how we can help all business owners in our community.
And I've said it on the record after her presentation, I'm just amazed by some of the work that she's done. I know she's reaching out to other hamlets. I guess my only question is she going to reach out to a further degree in this next year than just focusing on Bedford Hills? I know the primary focus is always, it started as Bedford Hills. Is this now we're going into year 2? Is she going to reach out in other ways to Katona and Bedford Village?
Well, first, let me say we still need to write a contract with her and
Okay.
establish exactly what the goals will be for
Okay, so we can adjust,
2024.
okay.
But she has done a great amount of work with the Katona Chamber and the
Yeah,
BVBA,
and the BVBA, yeah.
and bringing them all together for some unique events, and has helped increase their memberships and some of their opportunities for marketing. So I think there has been a good amount of outreach,
Yeah.
and she's also been able to bring in some businesses, outside of the, main hamlet areas into the conversation as, Bedford business as a whole.
As a whole, yeah.
Which is also a really great opportunity for the business organizations to bring in more members and have more resources to do the things that, I don't think that the town should be running the business chamber. They have a different interest, but there is a Venn diagram where we all sort of
Overlap at some
intersect in
point,
the
yeah.
middle, and that's where we're trying to understand how we can work together
Okay.
in those ways. And I think she's definitely started those conversations with all
Yeah.
three hamlets. It would be many, many more hours to do it, sort of full on in all three hamlets.
Right. Yeah,
but
I wouldn't expect full on. I know that the primary initial focus was, and I was 100% on board. Let's focus on Bedford Hills. And I've seen through some of the BVBA meetings, she's definitely reached out to the other hamlets. So I just don't know what percentage she's going to allocate to the other hamlets moving forward in year number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of what she's offering is how businesses, especially new businesses, can best work with the planning and building departments to understand what you can do with the spaces and how you can work effectively through our system. And so that will benefit townwide if there are ways that we can make those processes work better.
Yeah, and I've had conversation with her about streamlining that process in any way we can.
Right. So she has put forward some recommendations.
Good.
That's, going to be the next step to put them in place. But we will be working on a contract for precisely what
Yeah.
she's going to do. And I think it'll shift a little bit different from, where we landed last year,
Yeah.
because we're learning what is the best use of her time. So,
Great.
And the only other point that I would want to make is, this funding does expire, right? So this would be the last year that we would be able to draw from ARPA funds. So this year will be crucial in terms of, making sure that this will be sustainable beyond 2024. So kind of keeping that in mind for our, 2024 agenda, I think is really crucial. And I think that's the goal, that we want to reach a point where, whether it's a consolidated chamber or very strong chambers in each hamlet, that they're strong and vibrant and can function on their own.
Yeah, self-sufficient.
So I think that that's, part of our initiative as well.
well, yeah, as I said, I think there's the overlapping part that we all have an interest in, that, you want to make sure we're all participating fully in. And, if Bedford Hills doesn't have a chamber, it's hard to have them weighing in as a body on some of those things and working together. So that's, I think, part of the helping bring that to fruition. And that is definitely gaining momentum, so that's a good thing. But yes, I don't think it's a forever position. I think it's getting to a point where we've improved our processes and our relationships and understand how we can best work together. And those organizations also, have been a little bit reinvigorated by the activity as well. So we have a second? Oh, we did have a second.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, next we have a appeal to a response to a FOIL request for information to include resident email addresses in a FOIL request from Mr. Don Scott. Hi, Don.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Thanks for waiting, we put you last.
It's the last item of the year. It's an honor. But first,
You
I
get
just
the
want to
last
say,
word.
that's right. I just want to say about Abe, the best vote I ever made as a town board member was the vote to hire him. And he will be sorely missed, an incredible professional. And I'm reminded of that Joni Mitchell lyric, "You don't know what you've got till it's gone." And I
Oh,
think
boy.
you all will be
Oh, yeah.
appreciating that come February. But I wish him the best, and it's well deserved. It was
Thank
a pleasure to work with him.
Thank you.
As you know, I'm here to appeal the town board's decision denying my information request under the New York State Freedom of Information Law. I'm here to urge you to reverse the prior decision so that Bedford complies with New York State law and the published opinions of the New York State Committee on Open Government. Although the town's denial letter came over Boo Fumigali's signature, it was written by Eric Gordon in consultation with the Supervisor Calvis. I shouldn't have to be here. Since granting this request I filed 2 months ago should have been granted in a few days as in the past. The request could have been complied with a few clicks of the mouse by the superintendent's or supervisor's assistant who takes care of the email list. But somehow, nearly 2 months later, my request was denied. We sit here 2 months later at my request being denied originally made in October. As someone who used to sit in your chair, as a town board member, I've undergone substantial training in open meetings and government transparency taught by officials of the Committee on Open Government. My training, along with my research, tells me that the town's denial is in error and flatly contradicts settled New York law. An advisory opinion from the executive director of the Committee on Open Government in Albany explains why requests for the disclosure of resident email addresses should be honored. After reading your denial letter of November 2nd, I was thinking that maybe something had changed. I called the committee and spoke with the assistant executive director who confirmed that my recent FOIL request is covered by the committee's opinion letter, which I've shared with you. And she further confirmed that if the town or its attorney had reached out to her regarding my request, they would be provided with a copy of this opinion and informed that it should govern their decision in my case. The advisory opinion could not be clearer, and I quote, "The use of email has become routine on the parts of millions. Moreover, when an agency denies access to a record and the denial is challenged in court, the agency has the burden of proof. In Livison versus Town of Greenberg, it was held that a list of email addresses of residents used to inform them of events occurring in the town is public. In short, it could not be demonstrated that disclosure of an email address would rise to a level of, quote, unwarranted invasion, close quote, of privacy. Many individuals, purposely or otherwise, share their email addresses as a matter of course. The New York Supreme Court decision in Livson versus Town of Greenberg is also clear and is cited by the Committee on Open Government in their opinion. The case involves a nearly identical set of facts to my own regarding a town email distribution list. That case explicitly dismissed the argument that you put forth in your denial letter that you gave me. Quote, "The town's party's contention that disclosure of the requested email addresses would render the list subscribers more susceptible to phishing, scamming, spamming, and other email scams is speculative. The town parties failed to show that disclosure of the information would make the list subscribers more susceptible to any such acts than they ordinarily would be," close quote. Notably, our attorney, Eric Gordon, and his firm of Keenan Bean have issued prior opinions covering this type of disclosure request and have previously advised that these requests should be granted. At least one of such opinion was issued while I was on the town board. Mr. Gordon can confirm that it is well established that town email list the town email list must be disclosed when requested by political candidates who seek the list in order to explain positions on issues or merely seek support. In fact, I made the exact same request of the town for the town's email list in August of 2021, and that request was granted in a few days. Since the law of New York and the opinion of the Committee of Open Government regarding email disclosures has not changed since 2021, I'm surprised that the town has now decided to ignore the settled law of New York and substitute their own opinions for the state's. I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect something is amiss when a town starts quoting New Jersey law in its denial of my request when the law in the state of New York is clear regarding email disclosure and is consistent and it's undisputed. Institutions and elected officials in our country have never been held in lower esteem. Trust can only be built by you by following your oath of office, by following the laws of the town of Bedford, and by following the laws of the state of New York in coming to a decision. Two of you are lawyers up there, and I understand, Andres, you aspire to be a lawyer. Certainly, you can recognize a Supreme Court decision as the law of the land. And also, you have to recognize how clear-cut the opinion for the New York State Committee on Open Government is. A decision by you if you decide not to correct this error made by the town in your November 2nd letter, it requires me to file an Article 78 lawsuit. When you lose, and you will not only subject the taxpayers of the town to legal fees for defending that Article 78, you'll be paying my legal fees as well. So I hope you'll do the right thing. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you. So I think we were absolutely aware of the case and the opinion that you are citing. And I became aware of the request, and if we wanted to consider whether it was something that we wanted to challenge, or if we felt that we had the opportunity, if we didn't deny it, there was no way to challenge what the current state of this information is. I think privacy and data and cybersecurity and things like that are very growing and changing areas of the law, and they are also federal issues in a way that are being debated all the way up, to the top levels of courts and government. And so opinions that were issued perhaps in 2016 that are citing that everyone gives out their email address and no one cares about whether their data is shared may not be true in 2023. And it's something that I think a lot of people are concerned about and are becoming more aware of protecting their data, protecting their email addresses, protecting the ways that people can reach them. A lot of people who subscribe to our email list use their business email if they're a real estate agent or a business in town and want to know what's going on with town government. It doesn't mean that they've given it out to Target when they checked out. That's not the email address that they want to be getting spammed for advertisements or solicitations or information. Whether, the case that you cited had not proven that sharing email addresses could result in a phishing scam. But perhaps if we were challenged, we could show that we believe that this is opening people up to potential scams. I mean, more and more, we're receiving information that the town now has to provide tons of training for our staff about phishing. We have new software that will test people in our organization to see if they'll respond to a phishing email, to teach them what that looks like. This is all very new and scary information. And where does it stop? If we have to give over the email addresses of anyone who subscribes to our newsletter, what if they sign their children up for camp and we have to get their email addresses because all of those systems are now digital? It's a goal of ours to automate and make things digital, make it easier for the residents. But if providing their email to the address to the town means that now we have to share it with anyone who asks for it, could that open them up if someone knows their kid goes to camp, knows their child's name, knows they live in Bedford, knows their email address, and could reach out to them and trick them into thinking that it's the town reaching out to them or someone else? So I don't know where the Committee on Open Government or this Greenberg case, what kind of information was given when they said
It was identical to this.
well, that they failed to show that there could be a risk to these kinds of cybersecurity attacks. But I don't think there was the same level of phishing going on in 2016 as there is today. I'll also say, the information that, the Committee on Open Government is obviously trying to make government activity transparent and making it available to people in our community. But and I know they said the opposite thing, but I just don't agree that making people disclose their email addresses by participating in getting information from the town, by signing up for our new Notify Me service so that if you're a member of the sewer district, you can receive an email alert that we've posted a new sewer update. That all of that now we have to hand over their email addresses when you can't even find their email addresses online. I mean, you can find their home address, you can find their phone number. You can't find people's email addresses online. It really is something that you choose to give out. And so I just think that would discourage people from engaging with the town, discourage people from getting the newsletter or getting the information or signing up for Notify Me if they knew that it's not protected, that we have to share it. So that's, that was my gut reaction when I first heard in 2021 that the town, why did I get this email from a political candidate? It bothered me a lot. And the fact the town gave out my email address bothered me. And so I now feel the same way about the email addresses that we have. And
Can I just say something about that? The town never gave that information. Somebody stole that information.
okay, I'm not done,
There was
so
never
please,
a
hold on,
FOIA
please. If you would like
request
to come to the microphone and make a comment, you may, but when I'm finished. So, and I will say that I have never used the email addresses to send out, to explain my, political or, to seek support for office. I have used it to communicate to residents about town government issues in a way that is presented from the town. And when asked by an elected official, when I first came into office of my same party, would you please share your town email list with me? I said no. So that is where I have stood. I understand, my that fellow colleagues on the town board may also wish to speak about this. But that was the initial, perhaps there is going
is
to
that
be
a
a
question?
change in the law. No, I am
So
stating.
I said, do you have any questions of me? So, and
No,
is
I
that a
understand
question?
your position is this is the law, and I'm saying
okay.
I understand that's the law. I think
Okay,
everything
great.
you said
But
was
ju-
not untrue.
Show of hands, though, everybody.
No, Don, hold on a second, please. I'm
Okay.
going to ask the town board members to comment if they'd like to.
But I've actually asked for, if you have any questions. And then I'll answer your questions, and then you're happy to give me your reactions about.
I
this. But-
actually do have a question, and
Okay.
I would like to
Yes.
chime in.
So I'd just like to give them an opportunity
Great.
to speak or ask questions.
But I may have a question for you, too, so that's my, so
Okay.
in any case, I thought I would ask you if you have any questions for me, and
No,
return
well,
the same courtesy to me.
I'd like to return to New York's Freedom of Information Law, and this part of the law was actually directly cited by the Committee on Open Government, and I will read it. That section 89(2)B subsection 3 of New York's Freedom of Information Law indicates that a municipal body can actually withhold a list of names and addresses, including email addresses, if the list would be used for fundraising and solicitation. That's actually directly stated in the law. So considering that individuals who have recently run for office or remain politically engaged would, have the opportunity to use our residents' email addresses to support their political campaigns or those of like-minded candidates, including through fundraising. All of that considered, I worry that our town residents' email addresses will be misused for purposes that run counter to what FOIL was intended for, and it's directly stated in the law. So my question for you is, and you've sort of alluded to it, because I wanted to know, what do you intend to do with this list of emails? And to quote you or paraphrase you, you directly said that you would use this for political campaign purposes, and we know that campaigns involve money and fundraising. So can you assure us that these emails will not be used for reasons that are, prohibited by FOIL? I'm not done.
Yeah.
And my last question is even if we do reach such an agreement, which I'm sure you would agree to, how is that enforceable? You can agree to something, but you'll have the emails, and you could agree to something and then do another thing. And again, I will also defer back to what Supervisor Calvis said, that I don't share this concern about anyone from any particular political party. My concern is about the nature of the request, not the applicant himself or herself, right? So, and because of the lack of enforceability, because, reasoning wasn't directly stated, those are weak portions of the law. And I think this is an example of the law not catching up with the pace of digital technology, and that we are in an increasingly perilous era of cyber attacks. It's real, and there are cyber attackers that could use this information if they knew that they could use it. So we need to tread very carefully here, and that's my perspective. Thank you.
So there was a question there, I think.
Well, my question was, what do you intend to use with these emails? And I imagine that the answer is that you would agree to.
Well, there's a waiver, and as I was granted the list 2.5 years ago, I signed a waiver of how it would be used, and definitely not for solicitation. There's a definition of solicitation which involves asking for money, and number one, and it wouldn't be used for commercial purposes, nor would it be shared. So those are all things that are already well covered in your paperwork. But just a show of hands, so how many?
We didn't receive the waiver.
I didn't.
Can I just, we didn't get that part.
Madam Clerk, please come
I
to the
just
microphone.
need to say
and then-
something.
Yeah,
You know, I guess I feel very frustrated by this entire process because I am the FOIL officer. However, in this particular case, I came over to the supervisor's office when I got the FOIL request. I asked for the information. I was told that I could not have it, and I never heard another word again. Nobody communicated with me. The supervisor's office, our attorney, no one communicated to me. And I think that's outrageous, because if you had communicated with me, I would have, to your point, told you about the waiver that we ask. Even people trying to get information from the building department, they have to sign a waiver and say they're not going to use that information for solicitation purposes. we do the exact same thing when legally the list of names were given out in the past, and it has been given out several times. As as Eric knows, I did not like when I was told that I had to give out that information because I thought it was personal. However, that is not what the law says. And I took an oath, as did all of you, to obey the law. Whether I like it or not, I obey the law. And when you speak about somebody else who was a political candidate who used those lists, did not do it legally. They never put in a FOIL request. They just took the information because they had it right before them. I don't have it, so I can't give it until I'm given the information. And I really request that from here on in, that as a FOIL officer, I am kept in the loop in any of these processes, or I will resign.
Thank you.
So I think it's an interesting point, though, and I understand that that person did not obtain the list properly, but there was a lot of feedback that people were not happy having that violation of their privacy. So if the person did go through proper channels, I assume.
And that's different than what.
I understand.
Okay.
But my point is that precisely because we value the residents' privacy, it's because of that we want to protect it. I can't tell, but I'm still speaking. But I'm a board member and I'm still speaking.
Vickers speak, please.
How many people got up here today during the public hearing and expressed concerns about information becoming public, and they were concerned about their privacy? We are concerned about their privacy, and the law, like technology, evolves, and we all know that. And the reason nobody cited the New Jersey decision in 2021 was because it came out in 2023. And because the law and technology have evolved. And we're very concerned for our residents' privacy. That has been the concern throughout.
Just a quick question, though, show of hands. So everyone was aware of this November 2nd letter prior to it going out? I mean, everybody on the board.
We had asked for
There
legal
was-
advice.
There was legal advice there was the discussion after the request came in preliminarily, the records officer let us know that the request came in. It was referred to my office, as many FOILs are. The information was discussed with certain town officials, and it was determined that it couldn't be released from the records access officer because
So
of these new
that's-
issues that had come up.
I just, the thing I just wanted to make clear is that all of you all were involved in this discussion prior to November 2nd.
We received legal advice
Okay,
on
so there
what,
was a
and we
discussion, right.
received information about the cases, the existing opinion, the fact that Ms. Fumagalli brought up that there would be a waiver not to be used for solicitation. That was also
And that was
in
discussed among the board informally?
For
that
legal
was
advice. There
for
was a
legal advice. We asked
Okay,
for legal
discussed
advice on
among
this
the board.
because
That's all.
we were
simple
aware
question. I got it.
that the current state of the law in New York does say these email
Gotcha.
addresses must be disclosed to a FOIL request as part of open
Gotcha.
government.
That's all
But
I was
the
asking.
law.
So, I mean, so this kind of, my only point is, and just give me 1 sec. My only point is that it's kind of an odd situation to have the board handling a decision in advance of the FOIL officer's letter that was written.
Well, if the
I
FOIL
could
officer
finish?
had just
If-
released
if-
the
if-
information to you, there would be no way for us to challenge it.
If I could.
We couldn't take it back.
If I could.
couldn't get the information
So,
because you had it.
But if it had been released as a matter of course, there would be no opportunity for us to try to create a new precedent that we don't believe that this is the right law.
my point-
So that's why our town attorney,
That's why
when he
procedurally
advised
it
me
ended
that this
up in this
FOIL
way,
request
right.
came in, I said, let me get some background and some information on, could we challenge it? Is this being challenged in other states? Is the law changing or morphing in other places because data and privacy and security
So I
are
guess-
changing? And so that was
I
why the
understand.
New
I got
Jersey
it.
law was, I'm sorry, let me finish, please.
No, I know, but I know where you're
Don,
going. You had a conversation, so.
But this is not just for you, Don, so let her
Right,
finish.
yeah.
But
So
I didn't
so
get to
everyone else
finish my
can hear.
question, so we're not using the same respect for me, so, but go ahead.
I'll work on it.
Well, you asked me a question about the process, and I'm answering you. So
I had a simple question. Did you all discuss it among yourselves? And the answer was yes.
no, we discussed it with our attorney.
Okay, and among yourselves, so, but.
No, we discussed it in an executive session with our attorney, not
Okay.
not
Among-
in private among ourselves.
Right, but it's
No.
an executive session, there was a discussion about this. So the point I'm trying to make is think of how awkward this situation is, that I'm appealing to the group that's already made their decision. So in other words, you discuss.
And we could very well
you
change our
discuss it,
mind.
and-
You have the ability to
Or-
change people's minds.
Right,
during
right,
the
right, but
appeal.
I'm
And I
just
don't
saying
think
that-
we
That's
all,
why we're
and
here.
Don, I
that's-
don't think we
that's
all
not
are
the
on
way-
the same.
Eric, that's not your town code. That's my point. The
There's
town
nothing
code
in the
is-
code's procedure, there's nothing in the procedure for FOIL that says the records officer is the one who actually, officially makes the
Okay.
initial decision. And I've looked at that, so you can
Okay.
challenge that if you want.
Right,
That's the
and
case.
I'm often made aware of FOIL requests, and look into the legal
Again, it
ramifications
would
of
have made
certain
no
responses.
sense to not have discussed it with certain town officials and then just release the information and say, by the way, and then it would have been out, and these concerns that town officials have, legislative officials have, there would be no way to protect the residents. That's why the procedure was done that way. And FOIL doesn't really address that, so that's the way it came out. I understand your situation, you're saying you're appealing the board, but the board has not made a formal decision on this, so that's where we are. They have to make they're making you filed a formal appeal, they're making a formal decision in open court with the discussion or open session with the public viewing it. So this is the opportunity to make your case, and that's why we're here.
Okay.
And we do have the opportunity, if anyone would like to make a different recommendation or change how we do this. It is very frustrating that this is the current state of the law and that changing it would require, a fair amount of work on all our parts to appeal it and to get to that point.
I guess I do have a question for you, because you asked if we had questions for you. And my question to you is, why do you think that this information should be public? Generally speaking, not in this case, why do you not prioritize protecting this information of our residents?
Let's talk about the Greenberg case, rather than talk about my own specific.
But my question's to you.
This is gonna
Okay.
cover your question, and if it's not responsive, you let me know. And that is the Greenberg case. There was a weekly newsletter that went out from the supervisor, and the supervisor had a perspective on a number of things and provided data and information. The person, as I understand it, that brought the case wanted access to that same group of people to give them some other data that they might not be aware of, but on a particular issue. And so that is what's protected. You all, I'm running an election with two of you. You have access to the yes, as a government official, but you have weekly access to thousands of people to give a message, and so it puts somebody that's on the other side of that in a great disadvantage. So I think, not speaking for the Supreme Court of New York, but I think that's the transparency that they're trying to protect.
So anyone who disagreed with
Well, that didn't answer
some
my
data
question.
in the newsletter, should, as of right, through freedom of information on government procedures,
telling you
should
what the
be
case
able
is.
to email who gets that information.
I'm just telling you what that case was, so you can talk to the.
No, I understand
you
the
can talk
case.
to the.
I'm not
the
one of
Supreme
the
Court
two
of New
attorneys
York,
on the board,
and they'll
but
explain the theory of
I
why
do
they-
understand the case.
Yeah, okay.
But my question was specifically about why you think that information, those email addresses, should not be protected. If I signed up for the newsletter, you know, as a citizen, as a resident of the town of Bedford, just because I want to know what's happening. Like, when's the tree lighting? You know, when's the park going to be finished? And I'm not expecting that information to be given to anyone else for any other reason. Why do you not want to protect that from
Well,
me?
first of all, I think if I don't have your disclaimer in front of me, but I don't think your disclaimer leaves open the possibility that excuse me?
It doesn't, we were told by our attorney that we couldn't have it there on the website when we signed up for it.
But anyway,
So it's not there.
But I'm just asking you, like, if you think it
yeah,
should.
no, I think it is, that's the way we communicate now. So
It
giving.
is, and there are
yeah,
rules, like,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
there are
of course,
different
and
rules,
there-
like
there are
there's
rules for-
spam, and you
there's-
have to have opt-in
right.
and opt-out,
And
there are
have you ever
rules.
gotten an email that to your email that you don't know how they got your email address? And what do? You click the unsubscribe button. This isn't, we're in a new world. And listen, Andres,
No, I think Andres should have an opportunity to
No, but
respond to
No,
your comment, please.
And I
Thank
think
you.
we can't minimize, having worked with marginalized communities around the issue of digital literacy, that we have senior citizens who are prone to falling for phishing scams. We have marginalized, low-income residents that are more susceptible to that. So we have to step away from our privilege, those of us who are tech savvy, went to college, and think about residents that actually would be vulnerable to that kind of, cyber attacking, social engineering. We all don't respond the same way, and we can't minimize the risk and the risk to public safety. Thank you.
I think also the notion that someone will, I guess, sign an affidavit that they won't use this for solicitation or fundraising, it also says on email distribution software that you're supposed to have permission from the people who you're emailing. So you import 6,000 email addresses and then click a box that says, yes, I have permission to email all of these people. But you don't. So how is that, that's not really being monitored or policed, even though that's a law that's supposed to protect people's privacy. And I'm sure if you got the entire email list, the plan was probably to upload the entire thing and say, sure, I'm allowed to email all these people. So how do we have
You're not sure of anything.
No,
You can't speculate on how.
that's not, you weren't going
Right.
to upload the list and email everyone? I mean, that's kind of what's been
I
done
was
in the
going to
past.
we would follow the rules and would use it in a proper and legal way. That's but that's not what we're talking about here. We're
Well,
talking
it's
about
just how do we
the law of
monitor
New York
that,
and
you
whether
know?
or not this is foilable information.
It's what we're talking about, because to protect the
I
people
know those are
who
arguments that you'll make in
provide
your
their
Article
email.
78, but that's not for discussion here. I mean, we'll see
Well,
that.
I just think it's a shame that somebody who sat in this seat before and wanted to sit in this seat again is going to jeopardize taxpayer money over something like this.
That's your choice, whether or not you follow the law, okay? You've made that choice.
Well,
You're in the process.
our choice is to protect
Yeah,
resident privacy.
And follow the law of New York State. But nonetheless, listen, I mean, that's why it's kind of frustrating to be basically making the same argument to the same group that already made this decision prior to the November 2nd letter, which came from ostensibly Boo. So, but I hear you. But thank you. I really have nothing
Well, we
more to add.
actually
But I
haven't
also-
passed a resolution or made
No,
this
nobody's made
decision on
any
this
argument.
appeal at this point.
No.
So, but if
I
you'd
think-
like
I
to
think I
walk
can- I
away,
can
we
read the
can
room.
consider,
That's one of my
we can
skills.
continue to talk
Right.
about it.
Right.
But I also think it's a faulty argument to say that we have access as candidates to the same list, because you're then equating politics and government. And
I'm just quoting from a case, so.
Well, no,
But-
the law says that a candidate has the law says that the candidate has the right, and I have an email from you, Eric, that states that anybody running for office can have the email list as long as they prove that they are using it to convey to the people what their political beliefs are, not for fundraising,
But
not
that's
for
not what I'm
anything
saying.
else.
I think we all
That's
agree
not-
that's, sorry.
But that isn't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is Don is saying that we, in our government role, even though we were simultaneously candidates, had the opportunity to do whatever he said we were doing and to give opinions about things as government officials. But as government officials, we're not politicking. When I was giving information as a candidate, I was doing that from a political email. So in my government role, I was very strictly being a government official and disseminating government information. And I take those two roles very separately, very seriously. So I don't know why you're conflating government and politics.
I am just telling you.
I'm talking to Don because he was doing that.
I understand you don't like the law, and I understand you don't like the Supreme Court's decision, okay? And I understand that you're willing to invest.
But you're not answering what I'm asking, and I'm not talking about that. You haven't answered my question, you
please
haven't
d-
answered Stephanie's question,
please-
but you told us to ask questions.
No.
Now we're
I
asking, but you're
asked-
not answering.
So please tell me what your question is.
My question is why you are conflating politics and government. You're saying we had access to the email and you didn't, and that's an unfair advantage.
You have access as elected officials to that
To
email
give
list.
government
Right, and-
information.
Okay. Right, I got you.
I don't
That's
think.
apples and oranges.
Yeah, well, in
Thank
your
you.
view, in your
Thank
mind,
you
but
to
not
both.
in mine.
The FOIL request does not ask whether you are a political candidate
That's
or
correct.
whether you are, so I'm not really sure what the clerk was saying in that regard.
I think we're getting way outside of
Well,
of
look,
the.
if what we're required to do is anybody from anywhere can send us a FOIL request and get all of our residents' emails and perhaps more information about their personal lives. And then they'll tell us, oh, we won't use this for solicitation or marketing. And sure, if they're an elected, if they're running for office, I understand there may be an argument that, oh, they should have the same, but we don't know that from a FOIL request. We did with you, Don, but in terms of bad law, bad policy from the Supreme Court, which is not the highest court in New York, it sounds like it is, but it's not, that we could,
It's the second court. It's the
possibly
appellate division.
challenge.
There's-
Well-
There is the Court of Appeals above it.
yes, it
But-
could go to a different court.
Nobody has ever asked me what the process is with the FOIL. So for you to make that statement, it's not true, because that's not what we do. When we get a FOIL request, when I get a FOIL request, if it's, it has to be very specific. And if it is not, I go back to that person and say, this is not specific. We do it all the time. You have to be more specific. Tell us specifically what you want and why you want it. And I probably shouldn't ask the why, because I'm not really supposed to.
Well, you're not, and so that's the risk, is that we
But
really are
we do-
opening up our residents to
Right.
anyone obtaining their email addresses.
And as I said from the beginning, I don't like this law. I don't like the fact that we can give this information out. I never have. And when it first came to me as the FOIL officer that we had to give this information out, I was not happy about it, and I made a big fuss. But it's the law. And as long as it's the law of the state of New York, I personally feel like you have to give the information out. But I'm not making the decision, you are, and that's
So
up to you.
Eric, if there's a case law that, I guess the only way to change that law would be for the government on open committee to change their mind, open government, or someone has to challenge the existing case law. It's not legislation passed by, the government. It is case law, which is established when
Whether
people
something is
challenge
public
it.
privacy is a determination that's made on a case-by-case basis. The Committee on Open Government, which makes recommendations, it's not binding law, made a determination at some point that emails are subject to FOIL, email addresses. The Committee on Open Government has changed its opinion regarding what constitutes something that's protected by public privacy and not. I don't have specific examples
You're
for you,
talking
but
about
I.
the advisory opinion, correct?
The advisory opinion
Yeah,
from the
that
committee.
doesn't have any legal
Now,
weight.
the court case, you know, the Lipson court case is the law as it
Correct.
stands. And in order to change law, there has to be a challenge that results in a change of that law. And that's typically how the process works. You know, municipal governments have to comply with laws, but if there are laws that they feel have changed based upon changes in circumstances, changes in times, municipal governments are allowed to challenge those laws as well. So.
And there are other towns that I spoke with that are also not giving out email addresses and have said that they would challenge this if they had a request. So we're not alone in that. Well, in this decision. But I guess do you have anything else so that we can, okay. So we have an appeal before us. We do have to present a resolution as to how we want to proceed with this. I think the problem is that we want to protect our residents from having to give out their personal email addresses, but we have this pesky case law and advisory opinion not in our favor, and Mr. Scott has stated that he would sue the town and mount a case that this is improper. We would have to win that Article 78 or appeal it to a higher court if we didn't win it. So that would be a lot of time and effort and money. And so I think, I know there are passionate feelings here about how we don't love this. But I think, do we want to fight this and have to spend taxpayer money on attorneys and attorneys' fees and time and effort on having to go through this? Or do we have to find some other way to go forward?
Well, I'd like to ask for a little bit more time to dive into a little bit more detail. Because there's a lot of information out there that I think has changed since the 2016 decision. There are case law out there and appeals that are ongoing. I think it needs some more time. I do. I don't know if it means we table it till next meeting in January. I don't particularly want to make a decision right now. Don has brought forth some, the information that he's provided to us in the last 2 weeks. The law is currently what the law is. Do I think our case is exactly the same? I think every case is situational. So yeah, I'd like to request some more time for this.
I'm in agreement with Tom. I think we've heard arguments on both sides, and we really need more time to make what I will consider to be, I think it will be a difficult decision. I don't personally, I will say in the record that I don't agree with the law. I don't think it has caught up with the pace of technology. I've said that before, I'll say it again. And we need to weigh the pros and cons and put our residents first. And my final decision, and I think I can speak for the rest of the board, is really going to come down to our residents. Our residents come first. These are the individuals that we were elected to serve, and they are the individuals that I will prioritize.
I guess my question is, how much is resident privacy worth?
Comment?
This is not a great position to be in. I think either way, we prioritize the residents, right? We're prioritizing their privacy, but we're also prioritizing their tax dollars. I think that, that is something we have to take into consideration. I think if my fellow board members need more time for consideration, I support that. I also would just like to comment that there have been other laws of the land around, I don't know, slavery, abortion. No, in all seriousness, sometimes it's a little hurtful. Maybe it's meant in another way, but there have been other laws of the land that have, we have had to be challenged. And I don't necessarily think that this rises to that level, but I'm just making the point. And so I don't think it's wrong for us to want to challenge a law that we don't agree with. And so I think if we want to have a little more time to consider this, so be it.
Okay. Sounds like we have 4 town board members that would like to table this to the next meeting. If you would like to try to do additional research into some of the issues that were discussed, please do. I think, do we have a motion? I guess we'll table this till next.
Table
Eric?
at the next meeting, and I think if if Mr. Scott wants to submit any additional information during that time, certainly the board would be more than willing to consider any additional information that would be provided by Mr. Scott or other members of the public who happen
Absolutely,
to want to weigh in on it, so. But yeah, I think we could table it to the next meeting where the board, would make a decision at that time, so.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know that was not what you expected when you submitted a FOIL request, but it's a difficult
Can I just
topic.
say one more thing? Just my last comment here. Just so you know, we've only had 3 requests in my 22 years here, 4. So this isn't something that we get a lot of. On the other hand, I don't agree with it. I agree with all of you. So, maybe we need to fight the law as a group because I agree with it. I think it's an invasion of privacy, but that is what the law is. But again, we're lucky. We have only had 3 in 22 years. So,
Thank you. I lost my agenda. Okay. Any public comments? I have a couple of announcements. Hank Bergson has been selected as Veteran of the Year in Congressional District Number 17. Hank served with distinction in the Army from 1967 to 1970, including commanding B Company, 27th Infantry Regiment, Wolfhounds in Vietnam. After returning from Vietnam, Hank continued to serve his community. He is a 50-year member of the Katona Fire Department, served as chief of the department for 4 years, and has been a fire district commissioner for 30-plus years. He is also an active member of the Bedford Veterans Committee and has volunteered on several other town committees, including the Wireless Facilities Working Group. His commitment to service has been carried on by his 2 daughters, one of whom served in the Army and the other in the Peace Corps. Hank was honored today at the Putnam County Emergency Services Facility by Congressman Lawler, and we congratulate Mr. Bergson on this fabulous recognition, well-deserved. And do we have any other board announcements? This is the last meeting of 2023, hopefully, barring no emergencies or special meetings. But just want to thank everybody. And Gina, it was a doozy. And Gina, who does our tech back there in the room and edits our videos so beautifully, and who has helped us with so many of our tech issues and helping bring us into the modern era, has not renewed her contract with us. She's going to be spending more time with her family, and so we have a new replacement that will be here with us on screen and in this room. So thank you, Gina, for all your service.
Thanks, Gina.
Town of Bedford, and she will be around as a potential backup if we need her, if our new engagement needs a backup person. But we want to thank Gina for all of that. And happy holidays and happy New Year to everyone. We look forward to seeing you in the new year, January 2nd. Right off to a start, we'll have our organizational meeting, our business meeting. We will have a little summary of our 2023 department accomplishments, and then the next meeting, hopefully, we'll be looking at goals and strategic initiatives for the year ahead. So, meeting adjourned.